We need to talk about individualist anarchism. This is video number 3, looking at anarchism. In the first video, we looked at the core ideas, and in the second video, we looked at collectivist anarchism, and this video is on the other type, the other main thread, which is individualist anarchism. And this video probably won't make too much sense unless you've seen the first two, as it's going to refer back to a lot of the ideas that we have discussed there. Now, whereas collectivist anarchism mainly comes from Eastern Europe and Russia, individualist anarchism mainly comes from America. And what we can see here then is how the cultures of those different countries have influenced the views of the anarchists that live there. Because Eastern Europe and Russia, as you probably know, end up with kind of communist style societies, under Stalin and others. And so in those countries, there's very much a culture of collectivism. We're all in this together. And this therefore influences the fact that they believe that if you took the state away, we would end up living in collectives. But America is the land of the free. In America, the culture is very much individualism, libertarianism. I will maximize my freedom as much as possible. And so therefore, the thinkers in America, when they think about what would happen if you took away the state, argue that there wouldn't be this sense of community. There wouldn't be this natural collective human nature. There would be the opposite. We would break into small individual I guess group individuals, really, perhaps in small little kind of family units. And then we've got our various different thinkers that explore those ideas further. So let's pop across to our little PowerPoint here and talk about individualist anarchists. So what do they think? They think that humans are lone individuals, perhaps a bit like a liberal, where they talk about kind of individualism and rationalism and things like that. But lone goes further. And of course they are anarchists. They think that the state denies freedom. By having any kind of state, any kind of religion, any kind of authority, you are taking away the individual's right to decide their own destiny and to choose their own paths. They argue that society is incompatible with freedom, because society, living as a group, actually then puts pressures on you, puts restrictions on you, puts instructions, laws, expectations on you. So even society is not right for individualist anarchists. And they argue, or some of them argue, that people should attempt to be self-sufficient, meaning they should be able to provide for themselves without relying on a larger community. Now, broadly, individualist anarchism breaks down into two different types. We are actually going to slightly discuss three, and I'll explain why in a minute. But the reason why we're going to look at two is because the specification has two, but we will be looking at three. We're going to be looking at egoism, and our thinker there is Max Stirner, and we're going to be looking at anarcho-capitalism. And we don't actually have a key thinker there, but it is on the specifications, so we do need to know it. And I'm going to come back to this slide, and I'll explain these in detail after we've kind of looked at the key thinker, because it would make more sense. Now, first of all, though, I want to talk about individualist anarchism under Josiah Warren and Henry Thoreau. Now, look at the symbol in the corner. These are not key thinkers. Now, what this means is, you can use them in your essays. You perhaps should use them in your essays, but they don't count towards the two key thinker limit that you must include in your essay. So if you're going to use these guys, brilliant, but you still need to include two more that are not key thinkers. And the reason why we're bringing them in is because these are some of the early US anarchists that start to explore this idea of individualism, the isolation of the individual. Their kind of version of anarchism basically means that people retreat from society, perhaps off into the woods and the mountains, but certainly kind of live their lives as either individuals or as family units, where they do not have to be reliant on the state or on the society. I'm just going to move myself to the other side. These guys argue, similar to the collectivists, if you'd like a similarity, that exchanges and trading would still happen, but using the labor value for goods. Because if you don't have a state, you don't have a currency. If you just think that one through, like the currency comes from the Bank of England or the Bank of Scotland or the Bank of Northern Ireland, whatever it might be. So if you've got no state, you've got no currency. If you've got no currency, then how do we trade? And the answer here is that we exchange based on the labor value for goods. What's the labor value for goods? It's the amount of effort or time that went into making a certain item. So you wouldn't necessarily trade a house for a thimble, but you might trade 10,000 thimbles for a house, because then the trade value kind of starts to even up. These guys argue that we should reach anarchism through civil disobedience. And actually, later thinkers like Martin Luther King and Gandhi are actually quite inspired by these guys. You know, to bring change about in society, you should be civilly disobedient. Now, that means breaking the rules, but not necessarily rioting or causing a revolution, but breaking enough rules that eventually the state kind of falls away. But these are the guys that argue for simple living and self-sufficiency. So rather than investing massively into kind of things like technology or having masses of luxuries, these guys are arguing that people should live simple lives, self-sufficient, trading when they need to based on the labor value, but crucially isolated from the rest of society. Now, I think your reaction as a viewer to this video is probably going to depend on the kind of person you are. Some of us are very, very sociable, in which case this whole idea would seem very bizarre. Some of us prefer our own company, in which case this probably seems a lot more natural to you. Different people will kind of react to these ideas in different ways about whether it seems kind of rather bizarre or whether it seems like a kind of a natural extension of perhaps your personalities. So that's individualist anarchism. Then we have this version which is called anarcho-capitalism, which we're going to use as our key thinker here, Murray Rothbard, who unfortunately is also not a key thinker. Now, of course, I don't have to put these key thinkers in, these bonus key thinkers in. You can do it without it, but your essays will be better if you're able to refer to the thinkers behind these ideas. And anarcho-capitalism is on the spec, so you've got to know it, which is why I've kind of put them in. Now, he is a leading figure in 20th century libertarianism, which means this idea of kind of like maximizing freedom as much as possible. And what he does is he combines the ideas of classic liberalism, laissez-faire style economies, with the ideas of the US individualist anarchists. So i.e. he takes the ideas of Warren and, oh, I'm so sorry, I've just forgotten the name of the previous guy. He takes the ideas of Warren and Thoreau, kind of plugs in the ideas of Locke and Mill from the liberalism idea or angle, maybe even the ideas of like Nozick and that, and kind of invents this idea of anarcho-capitalism by saying, right, let's take away the state, but instead let's replace it with a form of capitalism rather than a form of isolated living. He rejects the need for the state under laissez-faire principles. And you might be kind of thinking, well, okay, so how do we have capitalism without a state? How's that going to work? Well, he thinks his ideas through, and he's worth Googling and having a read about. His Wikipedia entry is good. The Tutor to You entry on him is good and explains his ideas in more detail than I can here. But in short, he argues that public services can be better provided by the private sector. Now, right now, if you're living in the UK, if you go to the shops, it's provided by the private sector. Your food is provided by the private sector, Tesco, Asda. So are your clothes. But the chances are your health service, your police, your legal system, maybe your education are provided by the public sector, depending on whether you go to private school or not. Your rubbish is probably collected by the public sector. So we have what we call a kind of a mixed economy in the UK. Now, what Murray Rothbard is arguing is everything can be provided by the private sector, including health, including law, including protection. He is going to argue, or he does argue, that the state should not have the monopoly on force. You should not be forced to do something by a group of appointed or elected politicians. And instead, he argues that property is protected by private agencies. What does that mean? Well, that means, right, you've got your house, you've got your money, you've got your business, and now you go and pay someone, maybe some sort of insurance, to protect it. So, i.e., you rent a police, you rent a private security service. And Rothbard is arguing that all of the services that we might now get in the UK through our taxes and are provided by the public sphere, we would choose, because of maximizing freedom, to rent for ourselves or choose to buy in for ourselves. So I would probably go and get some healthcare insurance. I might get some police insurance. I might kind of pay for the legal services if I need it. But crucially, I have to kind of seek those things out for myself. Because he argues that the state is an organization of robbery. There's a quote for you there. And he argues that taxation is thieving and forcing you to do things is going to be thieving, and it would all work better under capitalism. And these capitalist courts, because he does think that you would have a legal system, but the legal system would be private, and the private courts would probably follow some sort of agreed legal code kind of between themselves. But of course, lots of other anarchists disagree with Rothbard quite strongly. And in fact, all the collective anarchists look at Rothbard and they see this as the antithesis of equality. If you think about the thinkers we've looked at, whether it's Kropotkin or oh gosh, my name's is terrible here. Not Proudhon, but the other one is Kropotkin and the other guy. They were arguing that anarchism will bring complete equality between people in these collective groupings. But obviously, if you have a capitalist system, you have all the inequalities that come with capitalism. So Rothbard is arguing for a system that would, almost by definition, create inequality. Private property is still here. And therefore, for many anarchists, this is not anarchism. But because he argues that we should get rid of the state, for our purposes, it is an alternative way in which society could kind of end up being organized if you took the state away. So let's just go back to our first slide here and have a look at these different types of individualist anarchism. So let's just look at the other side over here. Anarcho-capitalism, what is it? It believes in free market capitalism. I'm sorry, there's a typo there. They would argue that the free market can provide all the services that the state does, and inequality is natural. And in brackets, I've kind of put Nozick there, because Nozick was one of our thinkers for neoconservatism, who gets very close to kind of recommending these ideas, but I would suggest that you use Rothbard. The reason I put Nozick is because Nozick is one of our key thinkers from a different unit, but Rothbard fits it better, because this is basically his baby, anarcho-capitalism. He's the father of these ideas. But we're now, for our final slide here, going to look at a very unusual thinker called Max Stirner, who is the thinker behind egoism. And he argues for a form of individualist anarchism where people have no interest in the welfare of others because we are concerned only with ourselves, and people should be able to act in any way that they choose. And this has sometimes been called philosophical anarchism, because it's not necessarily a system of how you would organize society, but more like an ideal of how people should be able to live their lives. And he calls his idea egoism. Max Stirner, by the way, was a what's the word, like a pseudonym. This wasn't his real name, and this is the famous kind of cartoon of him, which has kind of become the icon for him. You might have seen it on t-shirts or in memes, but his ideas basically advocate ultimate selfishness and the idea that you can act in any way you choose, because why should there be any limits upon you? And he argues that all ideologies and all religions are spooks and ghosts. They are horrible little beasts and creatures that get in the way. The state restricts us. Get rid of it. Religion restricts us. Get rid of it. Anything that tells you how you should act, any kind of expectation on society that forces a moral code upon you, is wrong, because the only thing that matters, according to Max Stirner, is you and what you want to do. He says, we do not aspire to a communal life, but a life apart. And this is what, of course, makes him an individualist anarchist. He argues that we kind of live separately, act separately, taking what we want, doing what we want to do, not relying on one another. And he argues that individuals are entitled to everything. You want that thing? Take it. You're entitled to it. You want that other thing? Take it. You're entitled to it. Anything and everything is yours. Working together is rational, not natural. And what he means by that is, now, if we just take the red circle and the blue circle and we kind of put them together, individuals are entitled to everything, i.e. I can take whatever I want. So what then stops me stealing from other people? Well, firstly, he might argue there is no such thing as stealing, because what's theirs is yours and what's theirs is yours. But he also argues that people will use their brains and rationally decide that they should work together with others when it suits them, rather than kind of necessarily taking things that other people might regard as theirs. And so he argues that people will rationally choose not to take things from one another, or not to take things when it benefits themselves. Not because it's mutually beneficial, but because it benefits me to do so. It's unnatural, but it's rational. He argues for a violent insurrection to bring down the state. He argues that, like all of our anarchist thinkers, that the state is wrong and that it's damaging us and therefore it should be removed. And I love this quote by him. It's very bizarre and it kind of illustrates his ideas. He says, "For me, you are nothing but my food. Other people are only there to be consumed, to be used, to be exploited for your benefit. Under Max Stirner's idea, you are the only thing that matters, and you are perfectly entitled to use and exploit others to achieve your ends," which is, of course, very different to the ideas of Kropotkin and Proudhon and some of the other anarchists that we've kind of looked at. He expands on these ideas. We have only one relation to each other: use. Whether that use is using someone to get food, using someone to gain power, using someone to fulfill your desires, whatever it might be, that is what other people are there for. Now, of course, you might be kind of thinking, well, hang on a minute, if everyone is trying to use everyone else, well, how does that kind of work as a kind of way of living? And he kind of argues, well, we'll work together when we want to, but ultimately we can use one another because state, property, morality, religion, all of it must go. Now, I'm sure you have a huge amount of questions about Stirner's ideas and about the individual anarchists and about the anarcho-capitalism because these are very unusual ideas. So this is the moment when you need to grab your textbook, whichever one it is, and you need to go and read these guys. As I said earlier, I would thoroughly recommend the Tutor to You website, which explains more about these thinkers, and even Wikipedia if you want to kind of explore these ideas further. Because remember, this is paper 2, so you will definitely get a question on anarchism, so you need to know it inside out. So unlike socialism, conservatism, liberalism, where you can't be sure which questions you're going to get it on, you're definitely going to get anarchism. So you definitely need to make sure that you have a great grip on capitalist anarchism, on collective anarchism, individualist anarchism, and all the different types that go beneath it. So now this video is coming to its end. You've got your introductory points, you've taken some notes, but I'm sure you have questions and we've got more to learn. So grab your textbook, do some reading, find out more about these people, and then bring your questions and your discussion points to class, because I'm sure there's going to be lots for us to talk about in our seminars and in our groups. Thank you for listening. If you like the video, then like it, and if you haven't subscribed, then please do so. We have one more video on anarchism where I'm going to be kind of doing a summary of all these ideas. We're going to be looking at Emma Goldman, who was our final key thinker. Max Stirner, by the way, is a key thinker. We're going to be looking at Emma Goldman, and I'm also going to be putting a diagram and kind of showing you where the different thinkers lie on this kind of collectivist, individualist spectrum. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.